Hello guys, welcome to another episode of Film Club, and today I want to talk about a movie that's probably about a year old now, but I just got around to sitting down and watching it. It's one that escaped me last year. If you know anything about the channel, I had a lot of health problems last year specifically that I, in this year finally started to get over, and that's one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel. And so I've been kind of playing catch up with movies over the last couple months, and this is one that, I fully plan on going to see in the theater because I'm a fan of this franchise, and it just escaped me last summer. The movie that I'm talking about today is X-Men Apocalypse. So I finally sat down and watched X-Men Apocalypse, and I'm a huge fan of First Class and Days of Future Past. I think First Class is probably my favorite X-Men movie, even of the original trilogy of them. Days of Future Past, I know there are people out there that are not fans of it because it kind of changes some stuff from the original comic run. Being that I'm not really a Marvel comic reader, I'm more of a DC comic reader, Batman especially. I don't really personally care about that, and I think that movie's really good too. X-Men Apocalypse is easily the weakest of the three newer, we'll say original generation X-Men movies, because I guess they're technically the first generation. It's not an utter disappointment, but it is a disappointment in terms of just some of the really good things that they accomplished in First Class and Days of Future Past. And here, this movie just kind of boils down to almost, I just feel like again, and this is a problem I've had with Marvel movies in general, they have a really bad job of explaining the motivations of their villains. They tend to throw out villains that I consider are weak or very underdeveloped, and this is a movie that has that problem. So you have this big bad guy in the character Apocalypse, and the one thing I'll say off the bat here is that Oscar Isaac, who I think is a very good upcoming actor, and I really enjoy his work. Obviously, you'll know him from The Force Awakens. He's Poe Dameron. He was in a movie that I feel is very, very flawed, but he did an excellent job in it, and that's Ex Machina. He's been in a bunch of stuff. He plays the villain Apocalypse here. I think for what he's given, he does an outstanding job. You don't even know it's him because of the makeup job that he has. That part of, and that aspect of this movie is really good in the sense of his performance. Unfortunately, his villain is very underdeveloped. All it really is, he existed back in Egyptian times as this, Ender of Worlds type character. It kind of reminds me also of the character Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, except he's the Ender of this world, not of the universe. But the film starts off almost like I was watching the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie or something, where it's him, and they kind of try to tie it into the Bible and the Book of Revelations with the four horsemen of the apocalypse and stuff. I mean, his character's called Apocalypse, so it makes sense. And he always has four horsemen, as it were, and he had them back then, but then these people, kind of stopped what he was doing, and he gets trapped in this pyramid or whatever. So you flash forward to the present day, but the present day in this movie is the 1980s, and people, basically they dig him up and he comes back. One thing I will say, the most disappointing aspect of X-Men Apocalypse is First Class is set in the 1960s, Days of Future Past is set in the 1970s. Both of those movies did an outstanding job of existing in their time periods and really excelled at showcasing those time periods, especially Days of Future Past. There were a lot of 70s references. It really made you feel like you were in the 1970s, and in First Class, the 1960s. In this movie, there are maybe two little scenes that will remind you, hey, it's the 1980s. One of those scenes is three of the kids from Xavier's school go and see Return of the Jedi. Cool. That's like one of two scenes in that movie that were there to tell you, hey, it's the 1980s. That's it. They totally underutilized the setting, and that part of it really disappointed me. The second part of this movie that disappointed me was they have Cyclops' older brother, the character of Cyclops, is the character Havoc. And he's in the first movie, which is set in the 60s. He's in the second movie. Not as much in the second movie, but he's a main focus in the first movie. In this movie, he shows up, and obviously, if he was, let's say, 16 in the original First Class movie, this is supposed to be 20-some years later. He would be like 36. He looks like he's about 22. And he's Cyclops' brother, and he just that whole aspect of it was disappointing. And then, spoiler, they kill him in the shittiest way possible, and it's just like, whatever, he's dead. That part of the movie was really disappointing. I thought he was a really cool and interesting character, and they just killed him in the shittiest way possible. That part of the movie, very disappointing. But they bring Cyclops in, and then they took the girl that plays Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones, and they made her Jean Grey here. And they're kind of making good in this film franchise with the Jean Grey, is it Steve Summers? Is that his name? Cyclops' name, I think, is Steve Summers. I could be wrong with this. You can blast me in the comments. They make good on their relationship, because one of the things that the original X-Men film franchise changed was, instead of having Cyclops and Jean Grey have their relationship like the comics, it was Logan and Jean Grey, and that pissed off a lot of comic fanboys, and they were pissed for a long time about that. This new franchise has aimed to change that, which pleases those people. I personally don't really care because I don't read the Marvel comics, but whatever. That aspect of it's good. This is kind of their first meeting in this movie, because they bring Cyclops to this school for the first time, and he's starting to learn to adjust to his powers and stuff. That part of the movie is really, really good, and I like everything they do with the school, but they get away from what I think makes the movie really unique and interesting, at least the first two movies. The other thing I really disliked about this movie was, first of all, I love Michael Fassbender. I think he's one of the best actors in Hollywood right now. He's very versatile. He can play a strong, good character and a strong bad guy. I think he does excellent work in these recent Ridley Scott Alien movies playing David. Especially in Alien Covenant, he played David and Walter, so he played two androids that had to talk to each other and stuff. He's an excellent actor. He's done some really fascinating work with the character of Magneto. I think in X-Men First Class, you get to really sympathize for that villain, because he really had a harsh upbringing, and some really bad stuff happens to him, and it all deals with Nazis and concentration camps and that kind of stuff. But and that part of it's dark. In this movie, what I really disliked was they flashed him forward like 10 years or whatever since the events of Days of Future Past. Now he's married and he has a kid, and it just seems like the only catalyst they can have for that villain to come back and be a villain is tragedy. It is the catalyst they have for him in all three of these movies, but in this one, it is all they did the same thing to him again. And that was disappointing to me. Like in First Class, the catalyst for him becoming a villain is I'm not going to remember Kevin Bacon's character's name, but he kills his mother, and that's the catalyst that makes him a bad guy and want to kill all these Nazi people. In this movie, the catalyst for him going back and being Magneto is that he, these people show up looking for him, and it is an accident, but they kill his wife and his kid with like the same frickin' arrow or whatever. And that's the catalyst that makes him a bad guy again. And then he goes on, and then he has to go back to the steel mill that he works at, and he's gonna kill all these people because somebody there figured out that he was Magneto, and they called the FBI or the CIA or whatever government agency that came looking for him that accidentally killed his wife and kid. And then at that point is when Apocalypse shows up, and he's like, I'm busy right now, I want to kill these people, and that guy's just like, boom, and those people are killed. The other thing that I thought was really weird is they introduce a young version of the character Storm in this movie, but she has like a thick accent, and that's really weird because obviously Halle Berry Storm doesn't have an accent at all. So I don't know what the idea behind that was, other than for it to fit this movie. But it's just a very disappointing movie in comparison to the other two X movies. I think were such higher quality, and this one was just kind of like, whatever, it exists. I know next year they're putting out two X-Men movies. One is a direct sequel to this, and the other one is about the New Mutants. The one that is a direct sequel to this excites me because it is set in the 1990s, which is obviously when I grew up. So I'm excited, and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping they utilize that setting really well, because they didn't do shit with it here in Apocalypse for the 80s. And that's really disappointing. So X-Men Apocalypse, I'm going to only give it 1 thumb up instead of 2, because I think overall it's an okay movie. I would say I was entertained, but in comparison to what the first 2 movies in this franchise offered, it's a disappointment. So anyways, guys, hope you liked this video. Until next time.